Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Powys Pension Board on the 9th of July 2024. Do we have any apologies, please?
We have apologies from David Powell.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? None? Okay, thank you. So item 3, minutes of the meeting of the board on the 22nd of May, and we're being asked to authorise the chair to sign the minutes of the meeting as a correct record. The only thing I would say to them is that I think it will be necessary to take off Wayne Thomas as an apology, as in fact his term had expired at the time of the meeting. So that is the only amendment from me. Are colleagues happy that those represent a correct set of minutes of our discussions? And I will be. Yes, are we okay with that? Right, thank you. Item 4, matters arising. Item 6 on the minutes, the process to fill the position of board chair had begun. It's now been completed, and my successor will be David Edwards, who will bring a huge amount of experience to the table. David was previously Section 151 officer with Gwynedd Council, which is an administering authority, and so that's a really, really delightful move from my viewpoint. I think that was the only matter arising that I wish to bring to your attention. Any other matters arising from colleagues?
Perhaps I could just add, Chair, just for the board's benefit, that David's first meeting will be the one in September. And he would look to potentially hold that as a hybrid format again, to maybe try and meet some of the board face to face. But I'll email the board about that separately after the meeting.
Okay, although it does trigger a thought on item 12, which is showing the 18th of November as the next meeting. So if we can add in September to that, that would be helpful going forward. Thank you. So we move now on to the minutes of the Pension Investment Committee held on the 24th of June of this year. I'd like first of all to make a governance point, just for clarity, in that originally this meeting, which concentrated on responsible investment, was down as a subcommittee or a panel of the Pensions Investment Committee. But guidance came to us that because of the common membership with that subcommittee stroke panel and the Pension Investment Committee, it is therefore deemed to have been an additional meeting of the committee itself. So I think it may help board members to appreciate there is no subcommittee as such. And in that context, there was an earlier meeting of the Committee on Investment Monitoring, which was over and above the quarterly meeting cycle. So, like the board, the sheer scale of workload in these challenging times suggests that the traditional pattern of 4 quarterly meetings needs some supplementing to do justice to the demands on both the committee and board members. The plan now is for the responsible investment topic to feature as the focus of an annual committee meeting, notwithstanding the fact that obviously RI will feature routinely on all the scheduled quarterly meetings. As board chair, I was therefore an observer at the RI meeting. I was very much allowed and encouraged to offer comments as and when appropriate. The main focus of that meeting was on the environmental component of ESG. So we have environmental, social and governance, and no doubt social and governance will feature in the forthcoming training events, which will be run for both committee and board members. And the only other item from me on the committee is item 4, pointing out that the committee is now aware of the scrutiny by the board of cybersecurity at our last meeting. So those are the minutes of the committee. Are there any questions or are there any comments, please? No? Okay, thank you. So we move now on to item 6, which is the pension regulators codes of practice, particularly the general code of practice, and we are asked to receive the update and summary report. And I think it's now over to Chris, please.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. This is just a carry forward from the last meeting, the opening couple of paragraphs about just reminding board that there's a new general code of practice, which you'll be well aware. So the main part of this item is actually in the supplementary report, which follows the actual text on screen. You can see there. What the tool that we use is able to do is able to provide an output summary report that doesn't go into all the detail behind the scenes, because the report would be many, many pages long. So this report is an example of what we're able to output and present to board and committees on measuring progress against the general code. So just need to free up a bit of space on my screen so I can see it a bit better. There we are. Right. So essentially what the tool does is it breaks the general code down, 52 modules, into these 5 high-level modules. And within those, there's lots of different bits of work that I carry out to measure ourselves or the fund's position against the general code. And this report is just showing a high-level overview of where I've got to give board the assurance that I'm working on it. It is quite a big piece of work and it is going to take some time to complete it. This is the update, the progress report, essentially. So what this report is showing is it's showing that under the governing body, which is the line at the top of the page there, that I've done some work against the code, and essentially what we want to see the slider on this bar from red to green as far to the right as possible, because that's indicating a measure of how compliant we are against the code. So in the board structure and activities module, we can look at this in a bit more detail once we get into the private section of the meeting. It's saying that we're fully compliant in 3 out of 5 modules, indicating there's still a little bit of work to do to get us up to that fully compliant status. If we're 100% compliant, then the bar would be totally on the right-hand side of this green bar. To follow on from that, we've got a knowledge and understanding requirements, saying we're fully compliant in 2 out of 2 modules within the code on that one. And again, you can see the slider has moved to the right of the bar and we're in the green. So whilst this is a really high level, you can't see the context as part of this report as what's in there. What the tool does allow me to do is it does allow me to make some comments, which are then carry forward to this summary, which we see on the right-hand side here. Now, one approach that I've taken whilst completing this work is that not all sections of the new code are compliant or required by the public services pension schemes. There's lots in there that are relating to private sector. However, there's a lot of good practice within those modules as well. So I'm working through those as an option. And one of the options really is it suggests maybe we should consider a written remuneration or fee policy for the fund in line with the best practice. So whilst we don't have that at the minute, it is something the fund could consider. I think if there's some support from maybe the Good Governance Project might help with that as well. But this is an example of how I can make some comments in the worksheet and it flows forward through to the high-level summary. And I've also just made an additional comment at the bottom here to say ensure the fund is compliant with expectations within the code and the expectations within the Good Governance Project. So very high level, and it's intended to be, because we have the scope to dive into it in a bit more detail in a later section of the meeting, as we will be doing. But I just want to present it as a assurance to the board that I'm working through it. You can see I've done some work in respect of the governing body. If I scroll on, these are some of the modules that are underneath it. And the ones that are most relevant are, there's a chart at the bottom left which says 100%, the code 100% applies to public services. So if there's a 1 next to the text in the body of the document, that means it's definitely applicable. And the higher the number, as it gets up to 7, then it does not apply. So we're looking for numbers closer to 1, 2, 3s that we need to be focusing on, which is what I'm doing. But I'm trying to adopt the best practice areas where applicable as well.
Before we move on to the funding and investment, I think it may be worth just taking stock of the sort of format and structure.
Yeah.
Because what you've just said, Chris, has helped me interpret some of the things that I was head scratching a bit last night. What I think the signposts that are within the system are remarkably helpful. And I'm greatly encouraged by the practicalities of managing what is a transformational task, really.
Yeah.
So in terms of governing body, the issue which has been raised by members of the board in the past about some form of recompense, remuneration, call it what you will.
Yeah.
Is a topic that has raised its head in different places.
Yes.
And there are some clear constraints within that, particularly for people who are given time off from their day job. But it is recognised by the regulator that being on the pension board is not just about turning up for pension board meetings. Dare one word, use the training word as quite a considerable height to climb to be conversant with what pension board members are expected to be conversant with. So recognising that increasingly the pension funds are being able throughout England and Wales more and more to use their own resources to cope with the additional responsibilities that keep getting piled on to the staff, the committee members, the board members. No doubt my successor would be looking for a vehicle to steer this, because it's certainly something the Scheme Advisory Board are aware of from a number of discussions that some public, some private, that I've had with the chair of the Scheme Advisory Board, who in the last 12 months, of course, did visit us.
Yes. Online,
virtually. So that is an issue that won't go away. And I think perhaps David will be looking for an appropriate vehicle to move that forward in conjunction perhaps with a section 151 and with a monitoring officer, because there are implications, wider implications of it.
Yeah, noted. I think that was behind my thinking.
Yeah.
And those essential actions actually considering it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So rather than taking you through in detail, this is one of 3 reports that I'm able to produce. This is the highest level one. There is one available that does provide a little extra detail. And I'll demo that one to you later on in the item in the confidential section. But that's the first section. I haven't been able to work through them all, so you'll see some as we scroll through. They're all red because I simply haven't got to them yet. But I focused on some of those which were more pertinent at the time. So again, funding and investment, I've worked through 4 modules in that, and they're on the green side. Administration, I'm intending to try and take board through an example of that later on. But I have done some work on some of it, as you can see there, again, where we're compliant, in my view. And this is where board would be important part of this exercise, just to support my commentary as we work through this document as well. So IT and contributions, you can see fully compliant in 0 modules. It's not because we're not compliant, it's just because I haven't had the chance to work through the documents yet.
Yeah.
So. And I think the pension regulator, it's important to note that the pension regulator understands that he's not expecting us to be 100% compliant immediately, and that it is a work in progress. But they do stress that we do need to have a plan of action to make sure we work towards that, which is what we're demonstrating today. So communications and disclosure, again, next couple of modules, you can see there, we're in a good place. No actions or comments on the right-hand side of this. Just because they're not there now doesn't mean they won't appear at some point. I will revisit this periodically with the board and outside the board as well, and actions and comments will appear. And perhaps at that point we can dive deeper into the thinking behind those. Reporting TPR, I don't believe I've had the chance to complete this one yet. No, so I've done one module. Again, in my opinion, we're fully compliant in respect to that one module, which is reports. But I haven't yet had the chance to look at the reporting breaches of the law or the whistleblowing side of things for the regulator. So I'm assuming that'll be a focus of interest of the new board chair when they come in as well, to understand the processes that we have in place around this.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Absolutely. That's just what I'd scribbled down here. You know, check Powys's policy as a county council, and then where it applies exactly or with bells and whistles to pensions.
Yes, in terms of the whistleblowing, Powys do have a whistleblowing policy, I believe. So we could review that one and see whether that also applies to both the pension fund as staff. It would do, but whether it applies to pension board, pension fund in a wider context as well. So yeah, I'll take the new chair through the reporting processes and what as the time comes. And I believe that's it. So very high level at this stage for board. We'll have a look at it in a bit more detail and the item that's later on the agenda, if that's okay, Chair.
Yes, indeed. I think whilst we're at the top level at the moment, it's probably worth considering that the summary facility could potentially go to the committee every 3 or 6 months, because the regulator is giving a bit of leeway to boards to comply with this change, particularly as an awful lot of decisions are needed on things like if something that is there in the corporate sector is only best practice for us, is that more important than getting some of the other modules up to the right-hand side, which are definitely relating to the LGPS. So there are judgments to be made as to basically, Chris, where your time and your priorities lie. So I'm greatly encouraged by this high-level summary. It enables us on the one hand to give those overviews to committee and to the regulator if we're asked, but at the same time it allows you and us as a board to do the deeper dives, and I think that's precisely where the board fits in.
Yes, I'd agree. I touched earlier on that there's various reports I can extract from this tool. The one you're looking at here is the one that I would intend to take to committee.
Yeah.
There is another tier down, which includes a bit more detail, which would be the one that I'd intend to bring to board, because that gives a little bit more context. I'm still becoming familiar with the tool myself at this stage. So once I have a better understanding and experience of what it's able to output, this would be, the intention is that this is the one that goes to committee, really high level. The one that comes to board, even the public part of the meeting, has more detail.
Do you just want to give colleagues just a quick summary of how we are using this and who we're partnering with?
Yes, well, I think it's so we're using a tool that's been provided by Aon. I think it does say at the cover sheet it's an Aon document. There we are. Yeah. So this is a report that's produced by Aon. And
do you know whether Aon have got a user group of other pension funds using the tool?
There are some funds I'm aware of that are using it. I don't know if there's a user group of practitioners. Might be a good idea actually to suggest it, but I'm aware there are other funds, but numbers I don't know, I'm afraid.
No, okay. Right, well, I'm most impressed with that. Any observations or comments from colleagues, please? If not, thank you very much, Chris, and we can move on to item 7, operational and admin report and update, pages 31 to 32, and we're asked to receive the report.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just scrolling through the many pages to get to it. Board should be familiar with this document now. It's essentially just an update of the position from the last meeting. Usually I present it on a quarterly basis. I just need to point out this is only April and May. Because at the time of producing this report, I hadn't got to the end of the June month, or the June data wasn't available to me at that point in time. So only a couple of months on this occasion, rather than the usual 3 months. Nothing really in there to note, except perhaps that on the membership details, the membership has decreased slightly according to the statistics by 70 or so members. And that could just be that the nature of the data at that point in time. Just thought it was interesting numbers. Usually we see the numbers going the other way, and when I come on to the next item, you'll see the numbers in the schemes in general are increasing. So I haven't dug into the reasons as to why that number's decreased slightly. But it is a small number. It could just be some data cleansing or something like that. I need to look. And then again, it's just the usual 50-50 membership information on the number of employers as requested by board. So nothing other than that, just for information, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Chris. That's interesting to see. Any questions or comments, colleagues? No, okay, thank you. In which case we can move on to item. That's completing.
It is just looking at the numbers. Actually,
Yeah.
I can see that there's 10 less frozen refunds. So it could be that we've paid 10 more frozen refund records. That might explain 10 of them anyway. But I'll dig into numbers a bit more once I've had a chance. But yes,
that would be a good move, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Right, excellent. Thanks, Chris. So we move on to item 8, the legislation and governance update. To note the update and report on pages 33 to 38.
okay, thank you, Chair. I'm aware this is a long one, so I don't intend to go through it bullet point by bullet point for board, but I just wanted to pull out some of the relevant parts. I thought.
Is it all right, Chris,
Mm.
if we offer comments or questions as you go through the report rather than
Oh, please do.
leaving them till the end?
And if I skip over a bullet point, which
Yeah,
you're
right,
important, yeah,
thank
that's
you.
fine. Please do. Yeah.
Thank you.
So as usual, I try and work through on a scheme advisory board, wider LGPS regulator and dashboard sort of order. So looking at the first item, we're talking about the annual report guidance. I presented a report on this to board the last meeting, and it's just there to remind board that it is new guidance. We are identifying it. It's a requirement for us in order to produce the annual report, which you'll see in a draft form later on when my colleague presents that to you. It's just on there just for noting. Perhaps one that's a bit of interest is the fact that they're looking at the funding strategy statement guidance as well. This was produced back in 2016, so it's overdue a review, primarily because the nature of the LGPS has changed in that time. Lots of schemes are more than 100% funded now. We have employers who are in a surplus position, so we need to make sure the guidance accurately and correctly reflects those changes to the scheme in general. So it's good to see that that is being reviewed, and they're hoping to get it to us before the end of the calendar year. Just quickly move on to 2.4. Any questions? Do you have a question? No, okay. 2.4 is just there for information. I thought it was an interesting piece of work that the Scheme Advisory Board are doing with regards to what they're calling the gender pensions gap in the LGPS. Essentially, it's noted that the membership of the LGPS is predominantly made up of women, and it's looking at numbers against the average pays and whatnot, and whether there's any discrepancies between male and females in the scheme. I'm not going to go into any detail, but the link is there if you wanted to read that blog post about it.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. When I saw that, I thought that would be of keen interest to John and Ian, particularly just to see what's going on at a national level, just in case any of your members do express concern. I know it's quite high on the agenda for Scheme Advisory Board.
Right, yeah, so the link's there. Please feel free to read that.
Yeah, it's immensely helpful having these links.
Thank you. Okay, so 2.5 is a control cost control assessment. Just a bit of background to what this is. When the scheme was changed into career average revalued earnings scheme in 2014, a cost cap mechanism or cost mechanism was also introduced as well, which looked at two parameters, a cap and a collar, and should the cost of the scheme increase or decrease outside this cap or collar, then changes are made to the scheme to make it more affordable or enhance benefits in that case. So the Government Actuaries Department has completed the review, and they have identified that actually the scheme has actually crossed both the cost cap and the collar, but they're not proposing any changes to the scheme benefits, primarily because they've got to move in the same direction. So the two mechanisms they use, one has gone up and one has gone down, so they kind of offset each other. Therefore, there's no proposed amendments. Had they both moved in the same direction and were outside either the cap, the collar or the cap, then a recommendation would be made to amend the scheme. As it happens, because of the mechanisms used, there's no changes suggested.
I think it's fair to say that the cost mechanism is not working out as the Government Actuaries Department originally envisaged. And also for some other public sector schemes other than LGPS, there are some industrial relations issues as to why scheme benefits have not been increased. But because LGPS uniquely has a double cost control mechanism, we are in a way safeguarded from a degree of the volatility that is now an inherent part of the process that's in place.
It is, and there's all associated complications of changing the scheme benefits as well. We've seen that when they're changing the accrual rate. One of the proposed amendments that could be made is the speed at which benefits are accrued by scheme members, and just delivering that communication to scheme members is complicated and difficult as well. So we haven't got to worry about that at this point in time, but it's nice to know that that mechanism does operate in the background, and as and when it is triggered, obviously we'll deal with it accordingly. Okay, just going to touch on 2.6. Essentially, the minister at the time wrote to administration authorities in England to ask for their thoughts on merging of funds and pools. It didn't come to the authorities in Wales. I'm not sure that was intentional or not. I don't know. But it seems as though things have probably been overtaken since then because of the election that was called. So the last comment there just says that there may have been some funds that responded, there may not. I don't know. It's just to make board aware that there was a communication from the minister made recently.
Thanks, Chris. Really two dimensions to this, and they are split in a way by Offers Dyke. Certainly, I was board chair at Northumberland, which merged with Tyne and Wear, and should eventually that happen across our side of the border, there is a very clear role for boards, not the decision makers by a long way, but nevertheless, it's a long process for scheme merger. There was London Borough of Richmond and London Borough became part of Wandsworth Fund, and I wouldn't underestimate the workload involved for officers, for committee and for board, should we ever be in that situation here in Powys.
I think that's a fair comment. Yeah, we watch this space, I think, on that one. Thank you, Chair. 2.7 is just saying we're still awaiting progress on the good governance update. Again, we're expecting a delay now because of the general election that was called on the 4th of July.
And again, my understanding on that is that as far as Scheme Advisory Board are concerned, it's really all systems go, but it didn't quite get to the top of the priorities of the last government. But I understand that the new government is equally keen on it.
Okay, hopefully we'll see something about that again in the near future.
It's really good. The recommendations, in my view, are really sensible. and will improve arrangements.
Yeah, and having guidance around these sorts of things is helpful
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, we agree. 2.8 is just to say that Scheme Advisory Board wrote to some HR contacts in the LGA to ask about some data, if they had any data available on opt-outs. Just trying to understand the wider context of the LGPS and who might not be in the scheme and what reasons that might be and whatnot. So just something board aware that's also happened. 2.9 was the one I wanted to spend a little bit more time focusing on, if that's okay. This came in right at the end just before I was producing this report, which is why it's at the end, not at the start. I would have ideally liked to put at the start, but it's in. And this is just the scheme to let board know that Scheme Advisory Board have produced the annual report for 22-23. They operate 12 months behind because of they have to collect the data from all 88 funds and whatnot. But again, following previous trends, membership's increasing. 1.6% there, up to 6.5 million members essentially now. So a lot of people's benefits that we look after in the LGPS. Assets decreased. I think it's widely acknowledged that the market struggled a bit over that period. So assets followed that trend. Schemes and a positive cash flow position overall, including investment income, which is a similar position that we find ourselves in at the Powis Fund. And that's just a general trend because the schemes are maturing. Age profiles are getting older, membership's getting older. So that's just following that same trend. 2 million pensioners paid during the year. So again, that's a lot of money that's coming out of the LGPS and back into the economy because of the payments we're making. Investment management costs decreased, again, because a lot of these are performance related. If performance goes down, fees go down with that. So that explains that one. And just the last bullet point is just, I think, acknowledging that administration and governance costs are increasing within the LGPS, simply because there's more governance and oversight on LGPS administration teams now. So to see that trend being acknowledged in the annual report is also helpful. And just the last point there is that the overall level of the LGPS funding level is 107%. So in the main, a positive news story for the state of the LGPS. So I'll stop there in case there are any comments from anyone.
Any further comments or questions? Okay, thanks. Carry on, Chris,
Okay,
please.
thank you. 3 is just for information about some new guides available for the administrators. So we'll review and comment and incorporate those into our processes as required. McLeod update. It's just to let board know there's been some standard text produced that with the intention of it being used in our annual benefit statements for scheme members, just to explain what McLeod is and just to try and deliver a consistent message across the LGPS on how we're looking at it.
Could I perhaps ask a couple of questions here? In terms of 3.1 and AVCs, the guide to AVCs, have any communications taken place with scheme members on that?
Not as far as I'm aware yet. No.
Right. Will they be needed, do you think?
I mean, there are various emails.
Or helpful, maybe.
Yeah, there are communications about AVCs that are issued by one employer. The council, for example, quite often circulates AVC information around, which is helpful, which is obviously 90% of the membership.
Yeah. Okay.
But perhaps there's something in us doing something for the other 10% as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That. Thank you. And on 3.2, if I could just use this report as a vehicle for asking, are you able to give the board assurances that the 2024 annual benefit statements due out on the 31st of August are likely to be achieved by the deadline?
Yes, no problem at all. I'll come on to that one.
Okay.
Just for information, I didn't include the McLeod wording within this document.
Right.
It was long enough already.
Yeah.
So it is available should the board want it. In terms of the annual benefit statements, yeah, I'm aware that this week work has been completed on, for example, the annual allowance calculations, which is what we have to, one of the bits of work we have to undertake before advising scheme members. I've not had any concerns raised to me by the administration team around the
Okay.
production of the annual benefit statement. So yes, I'm confident we'll be able to do it.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Good news.
Okay, moving on. The pension regulator update is just again, they published one of their regular blogs, which they do on automatic enrolment, and the link is available within there. There's been some conversation around auto enrolment at a national level about whether they should change the parameters for it. So we watch this space because that will also have an impact on employers participating within the scheme as well if they're changing thresholds for pay and whatnot. So as I hear any more information, I'll share it with employers as required. They publish their corporate plan. Again, it's useful information for a board to be able to have a read should they choose to. The hyperlink again is there for you. So that was it for the pensions regulator. Any questions before I move on to dashboards?
No, not from me.
Okay, great, thank you, Chair. The usual pension dashboard update is in here. Again, they publish a regular blog as well on what they're doing. The big change I get, well, not a big change, but the update that we need to be aware of is the change to data standards. Change is the wrong word. Is to make sure we're aware of the revised data standards. There's obviously this pension dashboard system would only work depending on the data that goes into it. We've conducted several data quality testing exercises. We do it annually for the pension regulator annual report, but we acknowledge that the requirements for the dashboard are different to what we report to the regulator. So we carried out some high level assessments of our data for dashboard, and again in a red, amber, green measuring exercise, we're in greens across the board. Our data is generally in a pretty good state. So we just need to be conscious that we get as many calculations up to date as quickly as we can to make sure the data that's fed into the dashboard is also up to date as well. So,
And I think this will be a really important dimension for the board going forward, because I've heard the regulator mention they are expecting a significant number of complaints for inaccurate information within dashboard, which obviously would be combining a person's membership of various different schemes, and it is absolutely vital that our own data is on the nail, and that is one heck of a challenging task with so many variables in the system.
it is. So historically, we're in a good place when it comes to data. You might remember at one of the meetings, I can't remember which one, but the actuary gave an assurance that our data quality was good at the valuation.
Yes,
Historically it has been, but then we need to make sure we continue that going forward. I guess the concern for me is just to touch on your point there about expecting complaints. I'm not sure what impact that will have on our team. If we're providing data that's accurate, but another scheme isn't, will that person contact us because they think our data? It's a bit of an unknown, really. So we'll have to watch this space.
I'm pleased you mentioned that, because we are stepping into the unknown.
Yeah.
And the interrelationships between the different data providers into the records of Joe or Joanne Public. Will they go to their pension fund, which has the highest percentage of relevance to them? If they have three and one is 80%, the other two are 10 each, will they come to the 80% one, even though the erroneous data may be at one of the other providers? It's a great unknown. It will take protocols, it will take time, and all we can hope really is that the volume of questions and complaints is manageable, and B, the protocols are laid down for how a member of the public with different pension pots can get a feel for who to approach on the issue.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see, I guess. But it's yeah, as you say, it's walking into the unknown. So the idea behind it, I think in principle is great. And the execution, we'll have to wait and see how that goes. So that was it for that report, Chair. It was, I've nothing else to add.
No, I think there's so many relevant updates in there, Chris. Thanks for that. I think we've asked the questions as we've gone through, but are there any residual questions on that report, please? Or any observations? Okay, I don't hear anything, so we thank you, Chris, and we can move on to item 9, the review of the risk register, to review the administration, governance, and investment risk registers and consider any new risks. I'll just make an introductory comment, if I may, and that is that the general code of practice of the regulator points the finger very much at pension boards challenging the internal controls and looking for evidence and looking for documentation. Now, when we look across at the status column, controls in place, I think it leaves an onus on boards members to say, oh yes, give us some assurances, please, Mr. Board Secretary. It's very easy, and I've been in Chris's position myself in the past, so I can recognise it. It's very easy to state things like controls in place which give assurances, but the regulator is expecting pension boards to do some deep dives and look for that concrete evidence. So that's as it is, calling it as it is, Chris.
I think you've been reading my notes again, haven't you?
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah. Okay.
I was going to
And
just
vice versa.
probably. Yeah. I was just going to say that I think I mentioned previously that the fund uses the council's risk management system.
Yeah.
It's very, very helpful. It does produce or provide an option for all sorts of different output reports. So I must have gone through 6, 7 or 8 trying to find the report that best fit what I could deliver to board. I essentially broke it down to essentials. What's the risk? What's the score attached to that risk? What's the control and mitigation? What's the residual score? And this document shows you that, but that's all it shows you. It doesn't provide you any of the details. So I think it's still a case of I need to just dig a bit deeper under the bonnet of this one to provide something that's more meaningful for you. I completely acknowledge it.
But equally, Chris, I think there is a responsibility on the board to be asking the questions.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a two-way
100%.
symbiotic relationship, as they say.
Yeah. But no, I completely acknowledge your comment, Chair. I thought for the purposes of this, just for board to understand there is a mitigation and residual scores.
Yeah. You see, in a way, I think we're moving on to the second phase of the board's work on the risk register. The first phase was the deep dives to the 3 pillars, which I must confess I enjoyed, and was well received by the committee.
Yeah.
And it saved them an awful lot of work, and they were grateful to all of us on the board for our work on that. We've got adjusted scores now as a result of that deep dive, and so in a way we're seeing what our target areas are, and it may be where the highest residual risk might be one to perhaps focus on particular controls just for some assurances, almost on a hierarchical basis.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to take that approach to this meeting, Chair. If you prefer me to scroll through and we find the highest residual scores and look at those.
I hadn't actually anticipated you being able to do that now, but if you can, I have got the odd question down here that I'll pick up as we go through them. But if maybe it's not a bad idea that Chris, to
because we haven't taken that approach yet, have we?
We haven't, no. But as I say, I really think this is a new phase.
Yes, that's fair. Yeah. Okay. Well, if you've identified some already, Chair, when you scanned through, if you want to focus on those ones, but admin 04 there is the highest in this page, which is about pensions records and potential impact on scheme members.
Yes.
We just literally discussed that when it came to the dashboard item, actually. So the scope in here, if I'm able to produce a report that provides more data to show the controls and how, on the fact that I have carried out a data quality assessment.
I think that's a good way forward for the future. You know, because we can't do everything at the same time.
No. I think I had us down to look at one of the pillars. I forget which one. I think it was the investment pillar.
I had a
actually.
question on admin
10.
0010.
Yeah.
And the question on that is,
This is the overseas pensioners one.
the potential consequence doesn't just apply to overseas pensioners.
It doesn't. No.
So, you know, it is slightly wider. This is a specific risk because a different process is needed.
Yeah.
To check it out. Yes, you explain that, but the potential consequence is wider than the small percentage of people who live abroad.
Absolutely. And just to pick up on your earlier point around the fact that this report hasn't got that much detail, we've actually just concluded an exercise on life existence checking for overseas pensioners. So that could be included in here, for example, as the evidence to support this item.
Yes.
So, but yes, I completely take your point.
Yeah.
And we do participate in the National Fraud Initiative.
Yes.
Which obviously identifies any erroneous payments being made as well. So yeah, this document's too high level for you to understand the detail behind. Yeah, completely agree. The next one is a residual of 6 is governed 002, which is insufficient cash flow to meet liabilities. And potentially not being able to pay benefits. I think we've touched on this previously. It's understanding that we have got some liquid assets that we're able to move on should the need arise. But again, it doesn't really, the controller action then is pretty high level, cash flow forecast in place and review strategic asset allocation to keep positive cash flow. It doesn't tell you how we're going to do that.
Right.
No, I think that's a fair point.
Yeah.
Okay, loss of key personnel is the next highest risk on here. I think we just have to accept that that is a risk. Again, perhaps that could be linked to that item we discussed before about independent remuneration for the fund, not being linked to the council, for example.
Yes.
Not that we can do anything about that at this point in time, but it's something that's coming up more and more now as the LGPS develops.
I mean, I think I may have said in the past, maybe 10 years ago or so, Lothian, which are far bigger funds, and they had internal management as well of their investments. So we are talking a bit chalk and cheese here, but they did have separate terms and conditions for their staff. Now just go back to 10 again, please. Sorry, on the first group. There we go. Because I've just lost my mum, and I'm having to pay back some of her overpaid pension. So it's I've got personal experience of this. I think at some stage I think it's at the end of this financial year that we did previously ask for a report on the scale of write-offs.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, we didn't want to go back on last year unless it was to provide a benchmark.
Yeah.
But knowing firsthand the processes involved on the side of the relatives of the deceased pensioners, and from my own personal experiences when I was at Merseyside, it is one of those small signposts that could indicate problems or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think it would be a useful report to do after the year-end accounts.
It's something that's requested in the annual report, actually. Yeah. So I have made the request to the admin team already. For that.
Already,
yeah.
Okay.
So when that arrives, I'll share it with the board as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Were there any other items?
No, not on admin, no.
Okay. So governance.
Can I just ask a question, please, on that last one?
Yes, please do.
Can I just have some clarity around the deceased payments continuing? Is that in terms of a short term until you're notified by administrators or executors of an estate? So let's say for 6 months, or are we talking indefinite? Because presumably accounts would be closed and therefore those payments wouldn't go, you know, are we just talking about a fixed period of overpayments, or I'm not quite sure how that occurs?
Well, it depends, Debbie, really.
Or if they die intestate, that's
Yeah, and how we're
that's the
notified.
reason.
Sometimes we get notified by a family member almost immediately.
Yeah.
Means we're able to
Mm.
put things in place before payroll closed down. So in fact, there's an underpayment because there's some money due for that
Yeah,
month.
yeah.
Other times we're notified after the month end, therefore an overpayment has arisen. It can do with timings, but there's we are signed up to Tell Us Once system as well. So where a registrar is notified of a death, that then filters its way through the system to us almost immediately. So we're able to pick these up. So in terms of how long they go on for, it does depend on when we're told ultimately. But there are a few mechanisms in place for us to try and find out that information as soon as we can. Believe it or not, sometimes we pick it up from the local press as well. So we spot something in one of the local papers. We realise they're a scheme member, and we can almost be on the front foot before being notified by family members as well. So there's lots of different mechanisms out there. We do try and avoid overpayments where possible, knowing the complications that can bring in terms of repayments and whatnot. But it wouldn't be indefinitely because, as you say, bank accounts are closed. So payments will therefore be returned to us. And again, that's a prompt for us to speak to payroll to check that.
That's what, I assumed it was a short-term risk in terms of until
Usually.
that confirmation comes through, presumably, rather than it being an indefinite long-term.
Yes, absolutely. Usually it is, yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just going to add there on the bank accounts as well. It could be paid into joint accounts as well, so it may not be solely to the individual. Therefore, it may take longer for that to be noticed as well.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. Obviously, it is a delicate subject. And again, I had responsibility for this in my last day job. I think at the same time, there are cases, historic cases of people who simply deliberately do not inform the appropriate authorities. And then the dial, as it were, swings from extreme sympathy, support and flexibility and support to the family to fraud inquiries. And it's a very diplomatic balance really to be taken. And it's one of those where there is good practice, there are procedures, but you don't really, 99% of cases are I think resolved in a gentle, supportive way, but right for the scheme employers who are funding the scheme at the end of the day. But there is always that bad apple in a bunch.
I think that's a fair comment. I think I'd be fair in saying it's not really been an issue for us. Not to say it won't ever be, but since my time here, we've not really had any issue. I think one of the benefits of Powys is everyone tends to know everyone as well. I know it sounds silly to say that, but we do get a lot of information through word of mouth as well. So whilst I think it's a fair question to ask, it hasn't really been a problem as yet. So hopefully that'll continue.
Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie. Did you have any other ones?
No, not on.
We're on to governance now.
On governance, yeah.
On governance.
Just on the top one, I think we can now update that. Can't we?
That's this one here, isn't it?
We can.
Oh yes, appointment of new pension board chair. We can, so I'll update that one accordingly. Okay, made note to do that. Yeah, we talked about key personnel.
And on that, on 03, I wondered whether in the this column here, it was fair to be making reference to competitive pay rates.
Okay, I don't think that's in there from memory on the additional detail, so I will make a note to double check that. Okay. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Any others, Chair, that you might want to?
I've got 00 a one.
One. Yeah, these are in risk order,
Risk o-
not
well-
number order, I know.
No, I think it's good that they're in risk order. We just
To find it
just
in the list.
cope with the minor inconvenience. So we are clearly focusing on priorities. So I think it's good. But I just wondered whether in terms of reputational risk, we should add adverse report from the pension regulator could be shown as a potential consequence.
Yeah, I'll check if that's in there, because I know we went through a lot of these risks and identified reputational risks, but yeah, I will check that, yeah,
yeah.
that's fine.
Those were my three comments on the governance, but again, if colleagues have any others, please speak out.
No. In chat, so shall I move on to the investments?
Yes,
And if you
please,
got any in the investments that you perhaps wanted to pick up, so I'm into the investment one here, I think now. Govern, and there's the investment ones, yeah. So MiFID II, that's always on there.
Right, now what I thought there for review dates, because MiFID II is basically all about the knowledge and understanding of the decision makers, in other words, members of the pension committee, plus the support officers and the investment advisor. And if there is a change in any of those, particularly in between elections, one would expect a MiFID review to be undertaken. But what we do know is that after every election, there needs to be a review, because previously I think only one member of the committee came back, and so there was or was it the election before, two elections
Yeah,
ago.
before, yeah.
So I just think the review date could coincide with the next election.
Yeah, that's fine. As we're working through this report, I realise it's really high level. There's a lot more detail behind
Yeah,
this.
I accept that, yeah.
But I don't think it goes as far as talking about review upon election or anything like that. So I can probably
Yeah.
stress.
Have a think
Yeah.
anyway, yeah.
Okay. Are there any others on the investment pillar that you
On ES 12,
find it in the list?
yeah.
There it is. Okay. Climate
Now-
change, yeah.
Yeah, now I'm just thinking in the light of your comment that there's more detail behind this, and I'm just getting my head around that to see whether this is still relevant, but mitigations stands as a single word in glorious isolation.
It does. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
So
What I'll do-
what we
yeah.
know, what we do know is that the committee are seriously considering this. So that is I think an improved mitigation
Yeah.
and justifiable one to mention.
I think it's in the detail. I think it's already included. So I think as we're working through this, I think what I'll do is I'll extract a different report for board and share that after the meeting, so you can see the additional detail behind it.
Yeah.
I'll have the same issue tomorrow at the committee meeting tomorrow, because it's the
Yeah.
same report and they'll likely raise the same
Well,
issue.
I'll keep quiet at that.
Thank you. So no, that's fine. I'll share a more full and comprehensive risk register for board. I think with that in mind, were there any others that you wanted to pick out, Chair, or?
No, that was all, thank you.
Okay.
Are there any other comments from colleagues or questions? But I'm getting it into my head now that this is a summary, this is.
Really high level
This is
summary.
at a high level,
There's
yeah,
not enough in
so-
this. No, apologies.
No, it's okay, because I think coupled with what we've just talked about, we, for TPR summary and the general code, there are useful vehicles now for the committee to see, but the level of detail down for the board's deep dives, it's just a case of the board we don't want the board not to see the wood for the trees. And
Yeah.
so both summary vehicles to me seem to be good at showing that high level stuff.
Mm,
And that's a significant improvement in both cases.
mm.
So it's for us to call up, as a board, to call up the specific details for where we want to do a deep dive.
No, I think that's
And
fair.
with assurances that there are details behind these.
Quite comprehensive details,
Yeah.
actually, because of the time we've spent looking at it
Yeah.
the past 24 months, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that's,
No, that's
fair
grand.
comment.
I think that was good discussion. Thank you. So we move on to item 10, Wales Pension Partnership update. Note the reports on pages 51 to 86.
Okay, thank you, Chair. There's nothing in this that I really wanted to pull out. This is there for board's information. It's not my report at the end of the day. It is information shared by the WPP to try and ensure a consistent message is delivered at all board and committee meetings. However, there's one thing in here which actually has happened since this report was produced. And that is the WPP have announced that they've reappointed Waystone as the operator of the fund. So whilst it's not an actual, it came out after I produced this report, I'm afraid, so it is available on their website. So perhaps we should I just want to make board aware that that's an additional item not included in this report.
Now, there is something for me on this, and I thought I could actually bring it in now rather than as part of Chair's
Okay.
update. And that's just to give you some feedback on the engagement meetings that I attend.
Yep.
Along with the 7 other chairs of the Welsh pension boards. And I have to say that the 8 people, or 9, including the scheme member rep, are incredibly experienced people and the real resource to WPP. And we're in a situation now, after a fair amount of pushing rocks uphill, that the relationship, I think, between the board and the board chairs and the administering authority, and therefore with the joint committee, I think are now what we were hoping 3 or 4 years ago would materialise, and it has done. And I think this engagement meeting is proving its worth now. We've made some very useful comments that have been taken on board. And we're now at a situation where last meeting 9th of April, and I've got details of that meeting, and we're in a situation, it's both a set of minutes, but more importantly, I think, an executive summary similar to the one I did for our committee.
Yeah.
From the boards. I will, or maybe I'll ask Chris to circulate this to you all, because, as I say, I think we've got to where we wanted to be, and that's provides us all with a lot of assurances.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'll provide this to you, Chris.
Thank you. Yeah.
If you haven't already seen it,
I don't think I have, actually.
Okay. So that, if you like, completes the circle.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to ask me anything about those engagement meetings, please do. No, okay, but for John and Ian's awareness, the scheme member rep on who also observes the joint committee is from Gwynedd. And if our scheme member reps felt they wanted to put something in to the joint committee, Ossian Richards from Gwynedd is the person to go through, I would suggest. You may have your own contact routes already, but if you don't, if you can let Chris know, and we can ensure you do get that route in if there's anything you want to bring to the attention of the joint committees.
Chair, for me, yeah, I know Oshan anyway. He's also Unison, so yes, we do meet up on other occasions on different forums within Unison. So thank you.
That's very good to hear, John. Thank you.
That was it from my perspective, Chair and Sultan.
Okay, thank you. So we can move on to item 11, the standing items with no updates required. The usual four, and I'll ask Chris to talk us through them one by one, please.
No problem, Chair. I'm just scrolling down. Hopefully we are there now, yeah. The usual communications log, just a roundup of the emails that have circulated in respect to the pensions regulator updates and the dates they were sent. Updating the breaches register. Have I jumped ahead a little bit? I haven't. Breaches register. There is no new breaches been identified. I would have brought them to board for consideration if that was the case. So it's just an updated version of the breaches register attached for information, just updated at the end of May.
Right, and there may be an update on a particular issue in the private part of the agenda, if there is to be an update.
Yes, yeah, that's fine. So again, just for information, really, this report, Chair.
Thank you.
Obviously, have to take any questions if there are any.
Any questions or comments? No, well, thanks for that. Chris?
There we are.
So we are now going to move. Oh, item 12 is the future board meetings, of course, and the September date will be added as part of the minutes, so colleagues will be able to get that in their diaries.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Before you do the speech about going into the confidential section, Chair, can I just take this opportunity to formally acknowledge that this is your last meeting, and just like to say thank you on behalf of Powys Pension Fund for the time and effort that you put in over the recent years. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. Right, so item 13, confidential. The board needs to consider, in accordance with section 106(8) of the Local Government Pension Scheme Regs 2013, whether it goes into the confidential agenda with the press and public being excluded, as some of the information may relate to financial or business affairs of a particular person or organisation. So are we happy to move that motion? Okay, thank you very much. So we shall now wait for the Rachel to do the necessary